Hey everybody, this is Jordan from Shops and Sewings. Thank you guys so much for coming back to watch another video. Before we get started on today's topic, I'd like to cover a quick update to the channel. I did get a couple new cameras and a couple new mics added to my arsenal in order to kind of help with production a little bit. I know my videos haven't been easy to engage with, and part of that was poor audio quality, and the other part is simply that my videos are too long, and I understand that, and I'm trying to address both those issues from here on going forward. So let's get into today's topic. Today's topic is a question that gets asked a ton in the knife sharpening community. Whether you're new to sharpening and you're trying to figure out what route to go, or if you're an experienced sharpener who's looking to switch up their method and get a feel for something new. Okay, that question is, should I go freehand knife sharpening or should I go guided sharpening? Each has their pros and cons. We're going to lay those out today to the best of our ability, and we're going to go ahead and show you why each method has its strengths, why each method has its weaknesses, and hopefully help you as a consumer understand what you're getting yourself into. So let's go ahead and dive on down and take a look at what we got. Alright guys, so first we're going to talk about guided systems. Now guided systems are kind of the new kid on the block. Not only are they the new kid on the block, they're also kind of the cool kid on the block. They can do a lot for your knives in terms of sharpening and make it extremely easy for you. Okay, so generally speaking, when we get into guided systems, we have two types of guided systems. We have the clamp style, which seems to be the most popular, in which you would insert your knife blade into these clamps. You would have a stone in a stone carrier here, and you would sharpen until you hit your apex. Once you hit your apex, you would flip this clamp over. The other side of the blade would be exposed, and you sharpen that till you hit your apex. Then you go through a progression. You started off with your core stone, and you go all the way through until you get to your finer stone, whatever finish you desire, and you finish there. The other type is a table style, mainly being the Edge Pro Apex, but I also believe Hapstone has a table style out there as well. Now, table style is pretty similar. The only difference is instead of having a clamp to clamp your knife in, you just have a table that you would lay the knife blade on. So just, let's say these clamps were a table, you would essentially just sit your knife right there and sharpen away. Okay, so those are your two types of guided systems for the most part. Now, these guided systems can sharpen anywhere between 15 and 30 degrees. Relatively speaking, there are some that can do more, some that can do less, and there are some aftermarket parts out there for some of these sharpeners that may allow you to expand that range. Okay, now guided systems will generally speaking use 4x1 stones or 6x1 stones depending on the system that you're looking for. Now that is a big point to consider when you are looking for a system, because the size stones that you want to use can be very useful based on what size knives you're sharpening. Now, a lot of people don't mind doing this vertical type motion all across the blade to sharpen. Personally, I don't. I like to do sweeping motions. So I like the 6x1 stones because I can cover the whole length of the edge in one pass. That's going to have to be something that you decide for yourself at the end of the day. So, what are the pros for guided systems? Well, one, it's easy to learn. Okay, just about anybody who has a hand can sharpen a knife with this. Okay, that's really all you need: a hand, the ability to feel, and eyesight. And even then, you don't really need eyesight as long as you can feel. The next pro is going to be that you're going to get mostly beautiful and symmetrical edges. Now I say mostly because it's not always going to be that way. There are some caveats. You have to learn how to clamp the knife properly. You have to, make sure that you're removing material evenly. So there's some practice behind that, but for the most part, you're going to get really beautiful and symmetrical edges. Okay. The next pro is going to be the fact that you have complete control over whatever angle you want. Now, that is something that I don't think is recognized enough. A lot of people just think, okay, well, I should sharpen to 15 or 20 degrees or 17 degrees, depending on whatever knife they have, or sometimes they just follow the factory edge. And that can be fine, but we live in an era where there are super steels out there that can have extremely insane edge retention, right? And depending on the style of knife you have and the type of steel you have and the grind that's on it, there's so many factors, but once you start to understand what all these things combined mean for the type of use you should be using your knife for, then you can decide what angle to truly put on your knife. And that's a big deal, okay? Because you can be putting a 15-degree edge on something like, you know, Rex 45 on a super thin grind, and you'll get much superior edge retention than you would at 20 degrees. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's just the way it is. And maybe not that specific combo, but there is a nice little website on knifesteelnerds.com. He has a chart on there that actually you can kind of input some variables in there, and it'll tell you what degree to sharpen at to get the maximum edge retention. It's a really cool tool to see and to use. And you know, Laren Thompson over there, he's a genius for that. So my final pro that I have for these guided systems is going to be your stone and strop selection. There is a ton of options these days. A few years ago that wasn't really the case, but the more and more that these become more and more popular, you're getting tons of options. Anything from, you know, Chaucera stones, Veneve stones, matrix stones. Who was I just talking about with some? Shapton. Shapton is doing these 6x1 stones now. I don't know if they're doing the 4x1s, but nonetheless, you're having tons of options. In terms of strops, I mean, you name it, you can get it. Cordova, kangaroo leather, cowhide, balsa strops, whatever. I mean, you have all the options you could ever want in a guided system. You're no longer limited to just diamond plates or, you know, what was the other thing that the KME came with before? Was it, I think it was like just the natural stones with some oil. And if you wanted to go further, you had to use lapping films. Well, now you're at the point where we have stones that can actually do full mirror edges without the need of having to worry about lapping stones. And I think that's great. So let's cover cons really quick. In terms of cons, upfront costs can be high depending on the system you go with. Now, a company like Worksharp has made entry level very, very attainable with this at like a $50 system. Are the edges you get going to be great? No. Is the clamp sufficient? Barely. But it does get the job done. It does get your foot in the door into guided sharpening. But if you want to start getting into a real guided system, I mean, you're looking at minimum $200 with a basic set of stones, and then you have to build upon it to get some really nice results if that's what you're after. So you kind of have to do the research at that point in time and figure out what you feel is best for you. You know, what type of edges you're trying to do. You're trying to do coarse edges, you know, fine edges like 1,000 grit diamond. Are you trying to do high polish edges? Are you trying to do mirror edges? All that plays a huge role in what system and what stones you go with. So again, I mean, these can easily get into thousands of dollars, not thousands, I'd say over 1,000, maybe 1,200, 1,300 in some cases, fairly quickly if you want to go all out. My next con is going to be that when you're first learning, clamping can be a pain. You have to understand how to clamp properly, otherwise your angles are going to deviate on you and you're going to have a tip where the bevel is this tall and the rest of the knife is like the bevel is this tall. Or it's the opposite. So learning how to clamp properly is big and sometimes a pain in the butt. And even if you're experienced, sometimes you run into a knife that just, you can't figure out how to clamp properly. And, you know, sometimes you spend 10, 15 minutes trying to figure it out. So take it for what you will. Just understand that there are videos and there are graphs online to kind of help with that, and do your due diligence and check into that before you start, you know, just going ham on knives. My next con is going to be that you are limited in angle selection. Now, I know I said earlier that you have 15 to 30 degrees and that should cover most knives. The only reason why I'm putting that in the cons list is because it's a limitation. There are knives out there that require a higher than 30 degree edge angle. Granted, not many, but they are out there. There are some knives that maybe you want to put an 8 degree edge bevel on. I don't know why, but hey, it's something that's out there. Okay, so the fact that you're limited by these is a con at the end of the day, albeit they do have most of it covered. So that's kind of a caveat con there. Now, the next con is that these can be time consuming. You can spend a lot of time getting lost on sharpening these knives. And there's nothing wrong with that if you're kind of going into it knowing that, hey, I'm gonna spend a couple hours sharpening this knife. Again, also a caveat type of con here, because it all depends on the edge type that you're after. But once you get into this, it's kind of hard not to get into doing really, really nice mirror edges. So, just when you go into it, plan on spending a couple hours to do a really nice edge if that's what you're after. The next con I have is going to be the fact that it's not really portable. Now, yes, it's portable. Like, yes, I can put this in its case. I did make a case for this and put it all together and take it with me somewhere if I wanted to. But what I mean by lack of portability is you're not going to take the system out hunting with you or out in the field camping or anything like that to sharpen your knives. And that can be viewed as a limitation. If you're out there hunting and you are dulling your knife, carving up an animal, and you have no idea at this point how to sharpen your knife because you've relied so much on a guided system, unfortunately I have to put that in the con list, right? It's a small con and it's kind of like a superficial con, but keep that in mind and take that for what it's worth. My final con is going to be that knife length can be a problem. If you have a very large knife, say 8 inches plus, it's very hard not to get out to that tip and have that tip get taller on you. Even if you clamp it perfectly, it's reaching so far out that you're going to end up at a lower angle than what the rest of the knife is. Now, there are ways you can reclamp the knife. You can do lots of things to mitigate that, but it's kind of a hassle, and it's something that you don't have to deal with when you're freehanding a knife. So, again, these cons, they're all kind of like superficial or subjective cons, so keep that in mind. In my opinion, even though there's more cons than pros, the pros heavily outweigh the cons. So that's why it's still more popular. Even though there are more cons than pros, it's more popular for that reason, for the fact that it is very reliable and very easy to learn. So that does it for guided systems. We'll go ahead and move on to freehand next. Alright, so we covered the guided systems, so now let's get into freehand knife sharpening. With freehand knife sharpening, all you really need is stone. That's necessary. Stone holder, optional. You can sharpen in hand if you want, like this, okay? That's an option. A strop is highly recommended, though it's also not necessary. Once you've gained enough practice, you can fully deburr on a stone and there's no need for a strop. The only thing a strop would be used for at that point in time is maintenance, bringing an edge back to life when your knife starts to get a little dull. So let's cover the pros of freehand knife sharpening. You can sharpen just about anything you want so long as you've practiced a couple times on it. You can sharpen a straight razor, you can sharpen a knife, you can sharpen an axe, you can sharpen lawnmower blades, you can sharpen literally anything that has an edge on it, you can sharpen freehand. The only thing that's kind of a struggle is recurve blades, but even then, if with the right tools, it is something that can be done easier freehand than anything else. The next pro I'd say is going to be your stone and strop selection. Just like guided systems, you have tons of options, except for you have more with freehand because everything starts freehand first, because that's the original way of sharpening. There's only one exception that I know of, and that's the matrix stones. Matrix stones were made for the Edge Pro before they were ever brought to freehand. They are brought to freehand now under Columbia Gorge Stoneworks. They finally branded, and they also make them for the KME as well. So the matrix stones are now available in all platforms. But other than that, every other stone has always kind of been available in freehand first. Same thing with strops. My next pro is going to be the fact that you can start at any price point. If you're looking to start for $20, you can get started there. If you're looking to start at $100, you can start there. If you're looking to start at $500, you can start there. You can start just about anywhere, any price point, which is fantastic. Okay. So my only other pro that I have is versatility, okay? Like I was saying earlier, in terms of portability, it's much easier to take something like this in a backpack with you when you're hunting to touch up your edges with, okay? This is what, maybe a couple ounces? Throw it in your backpack and you can sharpen, well, resharpen your knife, hone it, micro bevel it, whatever you need to do. If you want to bring this with you, you can bring it with you. All of it is a lot easier to take around with you, and you can sharpen a wider variety of things with just some stones. Like literally you can even take something as small as this with you if you wanted to, anywhere you go, and not drop it like an idiot like me. But this is all you need. You can sharpen just about anything with this, so long as you practice enough. But my last statement there, as long as you practice enough, that leads us right into our cons list. So, cons. It can and likely will require more practice. And that really depends on your expectations, okay? If you're going into it like you don't really care about the way your edge looks, which some people don't, and that's fine, then you can get a sharp knife super quickly just by throwing a micro bevel on it, which is raising your angle and just hitting just the tip of the edge. And if you ensure that it's burr free, it will be super sharp, super quick. It may not be the prettiest looking thing, but it'll get the job done and get the job done quickly. Now, if you want to deliver some very beautiful edges that would be easily fooled as being done on a guided system, well, that requires a ton of hours into the hobby and a ton of neck sore nights, back sore, all that good stuff from just being hunched over trying to sharpen a knife for hours and hours and hours to get this beautiful mirror edge that's convex free, just to look like it was done on a guided system. And that was me when I got into sharpening. I wasn't, in a financially great place, so I got jealous of all these guys who had the guided systems, and I said, I'm going to do edges just as good as they can do, but I'm going to do it freehand. I'm going to do it for like a third of the cost. And I did do it. I had to put in hundreds and hundreds of hours sharpening to get to that point. But it was very gratifying when I got there. Now, my next con is going to be that it is super easy to mess up your edge halfway through sharpening. Say you're on your third stone in the progression, okay? You're going through, everything's fine, then you lift off the knife off the stone and you just check your bevel, okay? And then you continue to sharpen, okay? But you didn't realize that this time when you put the stone down, you were at a higher angle, maybe even by a couple degrees. So now you just basically sheared off your apex and made it much harder to get a consistent, clean apex. That is a disaster, because that means you have to go all the way back to the beginning, re-apex your knife at the angle that you originally set it at, and go through the whole progression again. Now the worst is when this happens on the final stone or the final two stones that you have, and that's happened to me a few times. So keep that in mind. That is a very easy thing to mess up when you're freehand sharpening. Very easy, and it's very frustrating. And when you're starting out, it will likely happen a lot. But in terms of cons, that's all I could really think of in terms of cons for freehand knife sharpening. Pros, quite a few. Cons, not very many. But you have to decide between the two which you like more. So that'll take us to our closing statements. I'll be right back for that. Alright guys, so we covered the freehand sharpening and the guided system sharpening. Now let's go ahead and discuss who is suited best for each method of sharpening. So, guided systems. Guided systems are perfect for somebody who's looking for a less stressful learning experience. It really takes all the guesswork out of the whole sharpening experience, so it makes it a lot easier for anybody to get into this hobby, which is a great thing. I personally want more people involved in this hobby. I think it's great for the community, and I think it's a fun learning experience for anybody. The next person I think would be good for is anybody who's looking for beautiful, symmetrical, perfect edges. Say you have a lot of very expensive knives, or just say you're OCD. That's fine. Hey, this system is going to deliver as long as the primary grinds on the knife are even and symmetrical. Your edge bevel is going to be beautiful every single time. And you really can't go wrong with that. So that's a huge win. The last type of person I think that this would really be suitable for is anybody who's doing any knife, whether it be an EDC knife, fixed blade, chef's knife, that is under 8 inches. Now, if you have the occasional 1 or 2 here or there that's larger, you can learn methods to reclamp and reposition the blade and sharpen it in sections, but I still think that's a hassle. So I really feel that the guided system is still just better for those 8-inch or less knives. Now, some people may disagree because they're really good at repositioning those, but if you're doing a ton of those larger knives, I'd strongly recommend freehand. So that just segued right into freehand. So let's talk about freehand. Freehand is perfect for those who want the versatility. If you're sharpening axes one day and sharpening a sword next day and a chef knife the day after that, and then your EDC folder the day after that, then freehand's obviously the way to go. If you want to be able to sharpen a knife in a pinch, then freehand's the way to go. They make pocket sharpeners out there for maybe you use a knife all day at work and maybe halfway through the day your knife's already dull. Well, great, there's pocket sharpeners out there and you're able to freehand, at any time, any place, anywhere. You're out camping, that's great. The versatility is just unmatched in freehand, okay? The next type of person is maybe somebody who's on a budget, like I was. That's how I got into freehand. I got into freehand because I couldn't afford the fancy system and I wanted to just make everybody feel really shitty for spending all that money. Excuse my language, but it's true. That's how I felt. I literally was like, I can do this for $100 while you spent $200-$300 to do what I just did. Granted, that was like a chip on my shoulder. And, maybe that's the type of person who still wants to freehand. Somebody who wants that chip on their shoulder to, really prove to themselves and maybe other people that they're capable of doing this with their bare hands. It's a rewarding feeling. It really is. And there's nothing wrong with that. That kind of segues into the last type of person that this would be good for. And that's somebody who has patience and confidence in themselves. That needs to be stated very clearly. You have to have patience because there will be mess ups. Whether you're guided sharpening or freehand sharpening, your first 5, maybe 10 knives should be knives that you don't really care about. And even on a guided system where your guides or your angles are set, you have the possibility to straight up mess up. You could have not clamped the knife properly. You could very easily remove too much material from one side or just too much material from the knife in general. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in either way and either method of sharpening. So if you're freehanding, you're going to mess up a little bit more because your angles are going to deviate on top of having the risk for all those other issues I just mentioned. So having patience and confidence in yourself is mandatory. Sorry for the noise of the traffic there, guys. Can't control that. But yeah, other than that, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, leave comments. All those little things help me out so much. Click my affiliate links if you want to buy anything. That really helps me out too. I really want to grow this channel, so any help is much appreciated. You all have a great day. Thank you so much.